Welcome to the Kingdom Factors of Little Rock, Arkansas podcast with your host, David Moody.
Hey, everybody. Glad you're here with us today, and we are very happy to have Jack on the call with us today. And Jack will he'll tell us a little more about his background in a minute. But of course, this is a Kingdom Factor session, and we're going to delve into Jack's business background a little bit, but also his faith background, and talk a little bit about how he, keeps those things sort of in balance and integrated and that sort of thing. So, Jack, thanks for being here. And Jack's engaged with an organization that I used to be on the board of. In fact, I was the board chair for a while. It's a very important nonprofit organization here in Arkansas that does technology, builds out technology in classrooms and has programming and all sorts of stuff for kids. And it's been a very successful program, and Jack can talk a little more about that in a minute. But it was an honor and privilege for me to be engaged with that organization for, about 4 or 5 years, I think. And I've been away from it a little bit now, but it's a wonderful bunch of folks, and Jack's part of that team. And so nice to have him on board today. So Jack, just, start us off with a little career background, a little career history here. You've got an accounting background, and I'm always interested about but you're sort of the reluctant accountant a little bit, aren't you?
Yeah, I used to refer to myself as a recovering CEO.
Yep, that's good. So how'd you end up doing what you're doing now? What was that trail like?
Well, I think it started back in high school when apparently I was good at math. And so everybody told me, you need to become an accountant because you'll make lots of money and have job security. So I kind of started out my career on a foundation of two lies right there. But, I ended up going to college, got an accounting degree, did my perfunctory 3 years of public accounting. Kind of always felt like I was cleaning up after the parade. And I attribute a lot of that to immaturity and youth. Ended up gravitating into the private sector, worked for some financial service firms, got involved with commercial mortgage accounting and servicing, which is kind of a niche field. Everybody thinks about residential mortgages,
right,
but commercial is kind of an entity unto itself. And I really liked it. But, quite honestly, for a number of years, I just felt unsatisfied, and I really wasn't sure what it was I was looking for, but there just seemed to be this kind of hollow thing there. And I ended up eventually working for a couple of software companies that were developing the technology to support the commercial mortgage industry. And I used my accounting background there somewhat, but what it really opened the door for me was to get involved with customers. And my job in both of the firms that I was with really involved acting as the go-between between our customer and our developers, trying to kind of bridge that communications gap to get them the solution they needed, but to be able to talk to both parties in a way that made sense. And quite frankly, I was pretty successful at that and really enjoyed it. There were times that my clients would fly me up in advance of a meeting with our management to help them prep and discuss what their needs were. And I think to an outsider, it was hard to tell if I was really working for the client or working for the company that I was with. And I attribute that. I think that was a successful result to be that way.
Mm-hmm.
But the last software company I was with was actually the president was on the board of a ministry, a children's home down in Guatemala. And one day I just kind of said, hey, next time you're going down there, I'd kind of like to tag along. I haven't been on a mission trip in a while, and I'd be interested just in seeing what's going on. And went down there with him. It was kind of a challenge. We were I ended up meeting his brother down in Guatemala. We were serving together. And there was a team at this children's home at the same time who was supposed to be doing a big construction project, but their container didn't arrive, and they were looking for things to do, which meant we ended up looking for things to do. And one of the things that kind of shook me was whenever we would go to them and ask, how could we help? The answer was, well, we really don't have anything for you to help with because we don't have anything to do, and we've got to go back to our church and tell them all the things we accomplished. So we can't have you taken away from our work, which was kind of an interesting thought when you're all down there for the cause of Christ and
Right.
trying to serve. But be that as it may, I left that week thinking two things. One, I'm really not called to be here long term, but it was a very comfortable, safe environment for me to introduce my wife and my then two children to the mission experience. And after a couple of years, I finally was able to convince them to give up a spring break and go to this country called Guatemala for a week and serve in this children's home. And long story short, they all fell in love with it. God called us to be down there full time as dorm parents.
Wow.
And gosh, it was really less than 6 months later, we had raised the funds and moved down to Guatemala and spent 5 years there. We were dorm parents to anywhere from 32 to 36 teenage girls, which was quite an interesting experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was funny growing up. My mother always said, I thought I was a good kid, but apparently she felt that I needed to have a comeuppance at some point. And she said, I hope that someday you have 6 girls just like you. Well, Mom lived to see me with 36 girls who were very much like me, except they spoke a different language. So,
that's very funny.
Anyway, that was really my service there was in a lot of ways out of my element. I knew we were called, and I just wanted to be obedient, and whatever I could do to serve, that's what I was going to do. But didn't really use my accounting background much, and it did give me a good insight into ministry and nonprofits in general. And so when we moved back after 5 years, brought home a little girl from Guatemala that we had adopted.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was a huge blessing from being down there. But when I came back, I decided maybe I can put my accounting background to use, and I started just a small kind of bookkeeping accounting business that focused on small ministries. And eventually one of my clients there hired me full time as a director of finance, stayed there for a few years, decided to try my hand at development and tried to raise funds for a foundation, which pointed out that while I have a lot of administrative skills that are helpful in that area, I just lacked the networking, connecting ability and what have you. It really wasn't a good fit. So decided to leave there, and a friend of mine who I actually worked with at that company had told me about this company called East that had run an ad, and they were looking for a director of finance. And I interviewed, and I loved them. Apparently they loved me, and the rest is history. It's been 4 years now, and I've just been thrilled to be a part of this.
And just for those listening, he did say an organization called EAST, and it stands for Environmental and Spatial Technology, which that doesn't even explain what they do. So
no, it really doesn't.
It sounds like an aerospace company or something. I mean, it's an interesting acronym.
It does.
So go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, we've been around for 30 years.
Yeah.
Next year's our 30th anniversary as an organization, which from what I've been led to believe, it's not terribly common with educational nonprofits. They usually don't have that kind of longevity, but ours has been blessed to be going for a long time, and I think that name and that acronym goes back 30 years. We haven't changed it. We've got a little bit of brand recognition going on,
Yes.
but in a nutshell, what we do is we provide an environment for grades K through 12 that fosters what we would refer to as relevant, individualized, life-changing experiences. And we do that through service and technology. So if you're a student, again, age K through 12 in an East program at your school, then basically the way things work is you start out the year by meeting with folks in your community. And I'm going to say our community could be anything from, it could be anything from the school that you're in to your city, your county. We've even got some projects go on statewide, but it gives the kids an opportunity to go out and talk with different people and find out what are the needs of the community. And then using that information, they come back to the classroom and try to figure out a way that they can use technology to meet those needs. And by technology, it could be anything from podcasting or video. We do a lot with 3D printers. We're starting to get into virtual reality goggle things and graphic GIS. I can never remember what that stands for. It's like geographical mapping and plotting. If you've ever been on one of those self-guided tours where the tour recognizes you're at a certain point and then it tells you what's going on at that point. Our kids are doing that. They're using computer-aided design to design everything from, I think one town came to the school and said, hey, our ballpark, our sports fields, the bleachers are antiquated. We need a new design. And a bunch of high school kids actually put the design together that was turned over to a contractor who actually built to those specifications. But it's really a cool program, and it's self-directed. It's all the kids are all doing this on their own.
I know it uses. I used to describe it when I was on the board as we're using technology to build life skills. Is really what's going on here. You're going to learn how to use CAD/K software and GIS software and do video production and all of that stuff. But really what you're learning long-term that you're going to use every day the rest of your life is listening, communication, problem solving, working in a team, it's all that wonderful soft skill stuff that why we call it soft skills, I don't know. It makes it sound unimportant, which is, so it's as much soft skill building as it is, technology, hard skill building, that kind of program. And even when I was there, we had kids that were like redesigning the drainage system in some area that was flood prone, or just a lot of interesting stuff. I remember there was a balloon project where they were launching these high altitude balloons, and they flew, it was thousands of miles, and it had a message in it. Someone found it, contacted the kids at the school. It was just a lot of neat stuff. And of course they were gathering data all along the way and learning how to analyze the data and, what did it mean and all those things. So it's a great program. And you're kind of you're doing more financial management than just true accounting, day-to-day accounting. Aren't you? Or is that the right characterization?
Yeah, I would. I've been here, like I said, I've been here for 4 years, and over the last 3 years of that, maybe, we've had a real big emphasis on the strategic planning and where are we going kind of thing. And so I've been pretty involved with that aspect of it, which is, I'm one of those people that I love to wonder, why do we do things and how can we do them better, and come up with ideas to make it happen. So being part of that strategic team has been great. And believe me, there's still enough accounting for me to keep doing that for some portion of my week. But
Well, that's cool. So what's your faith journey been like, Jack? I mean, did you grow up in a faith-based family, always going to church and involved in the church, or did you sort of come to it later on?
well, when I was growing up, my family was Catholic, and we would do our perfunctory. We had to go to the weekend service. I think I was probably in around 12 when they started doing the vigil services on Saturday nights. So
Right.
we would do that a lot instead of Sunday morning. And that was pretty much it. I actually went to a Catholic high school, and when I graduated from school, I really kind of disconnected with the church entirely. It didn't really resonate with me. I didn't understand a lot of what they did and why they did. It was kind of interesting. I was just thinking about this over the weekend. I was talking with a friend of mine. I've recently resumed hiking again. I used to do a lot of hiking and backpacking when I was younger.
Yeah.
And one of the things that reminded me was that even when I was going through that period in my late teens and early 20s of not feeling connected, when I got out in nature and in God's creation, it impressed upon me that, there really is a creator behind this.
Right.
This doesn't happen by chance, and
Right.
God's present, but I had no clue what that meant for me.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until I'd like to say I was one of those people that kind of defies the odds or ruins the curve, however you want to put it. But I didn't come to Christ until I was 34 years old. And not coincidentally, that was the first time I ever heard someone tell me that Jesus wanted a personal relationship with me.
Wow. Yeah.
And, as I said earlier, even through my career, I could say I was successful and we had a lot of things, but there was always something missing. And when that invitation was made, and it was in a big arena with a lot of people, I just knew that I had to answer that altar call. And at that moment, I accepted Christ and really never looked back. And my life hasn't been the same since.
So what was the connection between that happening and you sort of feeling like there was something missing, going to Guatemala, all of that? I mean, did that all happen kind of in a, close time frame, or did that just play out over years?
It took about 10 years.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate when my wife and I both accepted Christ on the same weekend, and we had friends who were attending a church not too far from where we lived, and they invited us to come with them. And it was a great church for us. The teaching was rock solid. The worship was on point, and probably equally important, although I didn't know that going in, was they were incredibly mission minded. I think this was back in 1994, 95 timeframe, and they were giving over $500,000 a year to missions, and on their way to hitting $1 million a year was kind of their goal.
Wow.
And it wasn't just the hollow investment. It was in the teams. We prayed over things. They were really actively involved in it. And just kind of on a lark, I went on my first mission trip to Bolivia, which was interesting because one of the first things that the missionary told us when we got there was, if you come and serve here with me in this part of Bolivia, I know that the Lord has called you, because there is absolutely no reason for you to be a tourist here. So, and anyway, I mean, I could talk for an hour just about that whole trip and the impact it had on me, but it really birthed this love of missions and ministry in general. And for the next, number of years, I really felt like I wanted to serve in ministry.
Yeah.
Kind of felt I was too late for seminary and being a pastor and all of that stuff. But I remember I kept thinking about what ministry can I have that would suit me and serve God. But it was now fast forward when we come back from that spring break and my family fell in love with it and wanted to be full-time on staff down there. As we were flying back on the plane, I did what most spiritually grounded dads are going to do in that situation. And I called for 30 days of prayer for the family before we made a decision. And I didn't tell them at the time, while they were praying for direction about going to Guatemala, I was praying that God wouldn't call us. I didn't want to go. God, don't send me there. And I was sitting in a Good Friday service. I don't remember what the particular topic was beside the resurrection.
Right.
But nobody else heard it, but I heard what was as close to an audible voice of God as I was going to hear.
Wow.
And basically said, you want to have your ministry, but if it's not my ministry, it's going to fail. And I've laid this thing in front of you where, there's hundreds of kids at this home in Guatemala that need somebody to go down and love on them and be the hands and feet of Jesus. And if you don't think that that's a worthy calling for you, then we need to talk a little more. And I was like, no, God, I'm good. I get it. We don't need to talk anymore. And it's kind of interesting. I was driving home and with my wife from that, and I said, hey, this is what happened. And she was amenable to it. She said, well, we've got a few things maybe we got to get cleared up, and our kids are in the middle of high school. Maybe, sounds like something we should do after they graduate, et cetera. And I'm glad we feel called. We just have to settle on the timing. And I guess I kind of thought my prayers about not going were maybe we're hitting home a little bit. But a couple of weeks later, I came back from a Father's Day weekend camping trip with my son and said to my wife, I was thinking about this. We really, if we're not going to Guatemala, we really need to get more involved with our church and find more ways to volunteer. And she said, well, let's hold off on that, because while you were gone, God gave me the timing, and he says we need to go ASAP. So we had the calling, we had the timing.
Wow.
And as I said, the support just materialized really quickly.
Yeah.
So
Isn't that crazy? Isn't that crazy? I hear so many stories where, we finally sort of, we finally stopped trying to exert our will and agenda on the situation and turn it over to God. And, lo and behold, we didn't know it was coming. Things just sort of work out. As I say, you get what you need when you need it, not what you want when you want it. And it's amazing that it works out the way it does. And yet we second guess it every time. Even when we've experienced it once, a lot of times we go, well, wait a minute. Are you sure about this?
Well, and quite frankly, one of the things that God drilled into my head that Good Friday service is basically, Jack, you've got an issue with pride, and you need to get over it. And that's really what it came down to. And while I'd like to think I've gotten a lot better, that's still an area that I need to be constantly aware of. When is it more about Jack and less about God? And how do we balance that?
I think that's a constant challenge for a lot of folks. And I read in a men's group at our church years ago, we went through a book called The Screw Tape Letters by C.S. Lewis. Mm-hmm. And in that book, there's this devil character who is training his apprentice about how you deal with these humans and get them to do what you want them to do. And one of the, there were a whole host of techniques and thought processes and things that they use to manipulate us humans, was the kind of the premise of the book. And, when things aren't going well, it's, hey, where's that God that's supposed to take care of you? he clearly is not doing his job. He doesn't care about you. But when things are going well, you're in control, right? It's all about you. You caused all this good stuff to happen. So you don't need God. And man, that's a slippery slope. It's so easy to fall into that just because of our flawed human nature, right? I mean, we want those that acceptance and accolades and recognition and all that stuff. It's sort of built into us. And there's nothing wrong with it, balanced. And as long as we know that it's not really us doing all that stuff, if we're doing it right, I think I always say I'm just a piece of conduit, simple piece of conduit, nothing to it, right? I mean, and don't try to add, don't try to add to or take away. Just let it flow through you. But man, is that a difficult thing to do, because we always want to kind of jump in and, like I say, I finally figured out after all these years where my seat on the bus of life is, and it's 2 seats back from the steering wheel. So I can see everything that's coming at me through the big windshield. I just can't grab the wheel and try to drive myself through it. Or anybody else.
Good analogy.
Thanks, Jack, for sharing all that with us. So now that you are where you are in your career, and you're engaged with, employees. Sorry about that. You're engaged with employees and vendors and folks outside the organization and all that stuff. So how does your faith manifest itself just in the way that you do what you do? Are you kind of outward with that, or are you a little more reserved and a lead by example kind of guy? I mean, how do you listen for opportunities to have some sort of faith-filled influence on other people? How do you operate in that space?
A little bit of all of the above. Really. I think that, by and large, we are not a Christian-based organization.
Right.
But I've been fortunate that there are a number of people that I'm close to here who are believers, and that helps. And then, there's others who, quite frankly, can at times be even hostile to the whole Christianity thing. And so, I think for me, it's just really important to know who I am in God and what He calls me to do and live and be, and then try to live that out. And so, in one sense, you kind of hope that somebody notices and says, gosh, you're different. Why?
Yeah.
What's going on? And that opens the door. But by the same token, if somebody even mentions church, gives you an opportunity to just ask, well, where do you go to church? And maybe they do, maybe they don't, but the conversation gets started. Or gosh, I think at times in the last couple of years, some of the folks that I work with have gone through some real tough times, and even if it's just simply, well, I'll pray for you, or can we pray now? Those kind of things. I just try to be sensitive to where the Holy Spirit's leading me. And, there's probably a lot of opportunities I haven't capitalized on. You always get in the car afterwards and think, oh, I could have said this, or I should have said this, or whatnot. But, I don't, I like so many people, I say, I wasn't given the gift of evangelism. I'm not going to be standing up in the middle of the office on a soapbox preaching, but I still think that it's important to, quote unquote, preach through your actions and how committed you are to what you believe in. And if I can be fair, if I can be a good steward, if I can have concern for people and folks see that, then hopefully some of that's being noticed and sinking in, and it's part of a witness.
It's the St. Francis of Assisi approach, right? It's
Exactly.
preach the gospel, use words if necessary, right?
Exactly.
Oh, well, that's kind of interesting. So, of the folks that you engage, when you engage someone that's really kind of hostile uh, about the whole Christianity thing in church and this and that, all of that. How do you handle that? Do you just kind of, stay calm and, you know, do what you know is the right thing, treat them nicely, all that kind of stuff, or do you ask questions, or how do you engage them on that?
Well, there you go again, all of the above. I think that it's no secret. If you look around society and our culture, we've gotten very divisive, and
Yeah.
there's so much argument and taking sides and fighting, and
Right.
I don't think there is enough listening and enough questioning, not harshly, like why on earth do you believe that, but
Right.
yeah. So many times when I've run into people that are let's say hostile toward Christianity, in my head, what's going on is, my goodness, who wounded you so badly?
Yeah.
Because it certainly wasn't Jesus. It
Right.
might have been some people using his name to do stuff and
That's
be
true. Many
misplayed.
times it's a church experience, right? It's
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I do try not to snap out that right off the bat, but more, tell me a little bit about, what was your background or whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just, it seems like when you ask questions, you get farther than when you're just trying to throw answers at people without knowing the basis for their questions. So that's a big part of it. But I think the other thing too is that it's just when I get a chance, and these don't come up all that much, but sometimes you need to point people away from the institution of the church and point them to the founder of the church. It's not about that congregation or that denomination, but this is what Jesus intended.
Right.
And he has in mind what's best for you. I have a friend of mine from, goes back to college, and I refer to him as my New Age Jewish friend, because while you're Jewish, he like looked into, experimented with everything. And we got in one of those conversations, about eternity and the path and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
But one of the things that came out of that conversation was a good lesson for me, and I hope it made him think too. But my statement, one of my closing statements was, okay, well, let's just say, if you wanted to concede that there is no God, there is no Jesus, Jesus isn't the way, that you don't want to buy into that. Let me ask you, if we were to follow the rules or the guidelines for life that the Bible lays out, as a society, as a world, would we be better off or worse off? And he had to admit, well, yeah, we'd be better off.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, so again, it's what God has in mind for us, and what he desires for us has our best interests in mind. And sometimes us being frail humans, we don't do the best job of reflecting that. But it's not about us, it's about him, and how do we draw people into a closer relationship with him.
Yeah. You're so right. That's great insight. I think just having more open conversation, like you said, and asking questions because we're sincerely interested in what the other person thinks, rather than, the the talking heads going at each other, full bore, where they're both talking at the same time and no one's listening, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's not conducive for any positive outcome right there.
Right.
I mean, that's just not how it works.
And when that medium becomes social media, then
Oh yeah,
it's all those problems on steroids,
oh
really.
yeah, absolutely. It just gets amplified and feeds on itself, right? It's again, it's that human nature thing. Golly, some of us are just quick to jump on the negative conversation about something when we can do it anonymously and we don't really have to justify our comments.
Yep. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, what could possibly go wrong?
No kidding. Well, and for me, if I can even continue on my faith journey, it's the last couple of years. I think one of the things that God's really been impressing on me is this whole concept of loving like Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote down John 13:35 says, "By this all men will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another." And
Mm.
I want to be a better disciple, but so much of Jesus loved everybody, and everybody's uniquely created in God's image. God doesn't want to see a single person, bound for hell. He wants the relationship, and everybody is worth something just because they were created by God. And I find myself challenged more and more about how can I love better like Jesus did.
Mm-hmm.
And so even in my work, my work environment, when somebody gives me challenges, and again, I don't always do this successfully, but I like to at least try and remind myself that as challenging as this person might be in this moment, God loves them and I should too. And how can I show his love by loving them better? And a lot of that is again, trying to understand where they're coming from, what
Yep.
their situation is, and not be as focused about pushing out my philosophy or my situation upon them.
Yeah, no, that's great insight. That's really good. Well, Jack, we're kind of winding up here, and it's been great. Thank you so much for your time and your insight. Really going to be valuable to the folks that watch and listen to this podcast. But I want to give you another opportunity here if you have any sort of nuggets of wisdom or from experience or something that you can share with, business owners, executives like you are in a company, nonprofit leaders that might give them some other things to think about, in their as they go through their day and try to be more Christ-like. Do you have any parting thoughts on that topic?
Boy, I could come up with a whole bag of parting thoughts, but I think I would sum it up. I would just encourage anybody who's listening to this that stand firm on the foundation of your faith. The more you can know God and understand what it is he's calling you to be, take comfort in that, try to live that out. And to quote another verse, and this one comes from Philippians 4:6-7. Don't be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And here's the key. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Jesus Christ. Gosh, if there's one thing our world needs right now, it's peace. And I do think that the world will notice people of peace. And if we've got that peaceful spirit about us, that in the midst of all the challenges that we face, whether you're trying to balance the books or fund the next project or balance the budget or whatever, if you can conduct yourself with an attitude of peace, because you know where your eternity lies, and you know that all this stuff on this earth is temporary, people are going to notice that, and that, I would hope, would be the kind of thing that attracts folks to you, because quite frankly, we don't see a lot of peaceful things when we turn on the television or pick up social media. So I would say that if focus on knowing who you are in God, what he expects from you, taking comfort in that concept of being a person of peace, and just look for the opportunities that God gives you. I think they're out there all the time, where you have a door that's cracked open to share your faith, introduce your faith, or even just find out where the person you're talking to is with respect to their faith.
Oh, that's great, Jack. I really like that. Just seeking peace and hopefully sharing that with others who are watching us in certain situations. And gosh, we don't have any control over a whole lot of things, but certainly not political and corporate leaders who are out there saying what they're saying, doing what they're doing. And, let's just be that light of peace in those one-on-one relationships that we have every day, where we do have some opportunity to have a positive influence on somebody at the real world level, and let the talking heads in social media just do what they do and try not to worry about what they're doing. Right? Try not to let it distract us. Stay on task with just being the best Christ-like person you can be every day, and let people see it. That's really good. Jack, thank you so much for your time. It's just been wonderful visiting with you, and I know that folks that listen to this and watch it are gonna feel the same way. Your sincerity and your kindness really shine through, and so the things you were talking about, striving for on a daily basis, you certainly achieved it here in the last 45 minutes with us. So thank you so much for that.
Well, thank you, David. I've really enjoyed our time together.
All right. Well, okay, everybody. Hope you enjoyed this session with Jack, and we will see you again soon.